So Just In is another addition to my collection of Chanel fragrances from Chanel's Les Exclusifs line. I would say that this one is probably one of the top from this line of fragrances. Hello guys, welcome back. I hope everyone is doing great. So Just In is this package that I got earlier today with a fragrance from the house of Chanel. I have quite a collection from Chanel, and I recently posted the video on Coromandel, which in my opinion is like a signature scent, but I love so many of the other fragrances and I own quite a few. But like I said in my other video, there are so many that I still need to explore. And this one was a blind buy. I did not test this before making the purchase. I saw a good deal, reputable seller, 200 ml, the large size bottle. And I did do a lot of research in terms of watching reviews and reading about the fragrance before I made the purchase. So I felt somewhat confident. And I did open the box earlier today when I got it, just a disclaimer. So this is not a first impression. I did spray it on my arm. So I'm not sure what to call the video because it's not a first impression on camera. And it's not what I would call an early impression when I test samples and I spray them on myself a few times. I literally opened this earlier today, about a few hours ago, and I sprayed it on my arm just because I wanted to see what the fragrance smelled like. And also, some of the fragrances, when it's not from the actual Chanel boutique, are wrapped so well that it takes 10 minutes just to get the fragrance out of the wrapping. So I wasn't going to do that on camera and waste all that time. So in fact, in this case, there were 2 boxes to open and the fragrance was wrapped really, really well. So it took a little while. So we are talking about Chanel's Bois d'Azil. That's what I purchased, Bois d'Azil. And this does not disappoint. So I watched Persilet's review of this fragrance along with some other YouTubers, and I read about it as well. So after I saw that review of the fragrance and what I've been reading about this, I just went ahead and made the purchase. And based on what I smelled from the few moments that I got my nose on this about an hour ago, I don't think that I have any regrets here. So Bois d'Azil is a fragrance that was originally released in 1926. So this fragrance has quite a history in the house of Chanel, and the perfumer was Ernest Beau. And this is one of those fragrances that in 2007, I believe, came in the EDT version and thereafter was reformulated and turned into an EDP. But the EDT did come in the same type of bottle from the pictures that I saw online. So the EDP is a 2016 release, and the nose behind this is Jack Polge. And the fragrance is basically a sandalwood fragrance. I am a big fan of sandalwood fragrances. I think the last one that I owned that at some point I spoke about on this channel is Matière Première Santal Austral, but I haven't really found a sandalwood fragrance that I'm like really loving. I ended up selling Santal Austral, even though it was a nice fragrance. I found it a little flat, linear, maybe a little boring, to be honest, but I don't think that Bois d'Azil is that type of fragrance. I feel like as much as the Chanel fragrances are, in some ways, a lot of them are very simple and aldehydic and sophisticated, and they're subdued. They're not over-the-top niche fragrances. Some of them, or maybe a lot of them, are actually quite interesting and not fragrances that I would call linear whatsoever. They might be light-wearing fragrances, and some of them struggle with performance, but I wouldn't say that the house releases linear fragrances, even though the scent profiles overall give the impression of being simple. There's like a simplicity, like an elegant simplicity to the fragrances from the house of Chanel, in my opinion at least. This is all my perception, my opinion. You guys can let me know in the comments if you agree. So let's spray Bois d'Azil and talk about what it smells like. Very nice atomizer. And I'm really loving this 200 ml size bottle. This is great. So it opens up citrusy, fresh. I get the aldehydic nature that comes along with the Chanel fragrances. It has a really nice creaminess to it as well. And even though it opens up fresh and I get that citrus and it's aldehydic, it has a nice denseness to it so that it's not ultra transparent, so to speak. And even earlier when I sprayed this and got my nose on it, in the initial opening part of the fragrance, I'm picking up on something powdery. I was wondering if there was iris in here. Something very powdery, a little citrusy and aldehydic about the opening. It's really quite beautiful. It's after a few minutes of spraying the fragrance that the sandalwood starts to come through. It's not apparent when you first spray this, at least to my nose. In the initial opening, I feel like I'm not really getting that this is a sandalwood fragrance. It doesn't take long for the sandalwood to sort of start coming through, but I feel like that initial opening to my nose when I was smelling it earlier and just now as I'm experiencing this, it's more about something powdery, citrusy, delicate, a little aldehydic, and it does take a little bit for the sandalwood to start to come through. But when the sandalwood does start to come through, the fragrance made me think of Guerlain's Samsara. So I have 2 bottles of Guerlain Samsara, the vintage formulations with the gold cap from the 80s. I think one of the 2 bottles is actually from the year that it was released, and they're magnificent smelling fragrances with real Mysore sandalwood, which through the years they started using less and less of until at some point I believe Samsara no longer had Mysore sandalwood. And so that's why the vintage version is so different from what Samsara is today. But when the sandalwood starts to come through here, it did remind me of Samsara. It's really surprisingly beautiful. It's not what I expected. I did not expect that scent profile. The sandalwood is starting to come through. It's so creamy. There's something a little floral about the fragrance, and that's the part that's bringing me to Samsara, the sandalwood. There's something a little floral. There are spices, but I can't quite detect exactly what that spice is. I would say that there's nothing sweet about the fragrance. It's a little bit resinous, but there's nothing sweet about it. And all I can say is that the sandalwood in here just seems really, really creamy. And overall, from my limited experience with this fragrance, because I've never tested this, I've never gotten my nose on this, so I'm just smelling this for the first time about an hour ago for a little bit until it dried down. And just now with this fresh spray on my arm, it's such a sophisticated fragrance. It really is very well done. There's obviously a reason that this one has a lot of love in the fragrance community. It's absolutely beautiful. I think I'm going to love this in my collection. There's something, and I'm not sure if anyone else picks up on this, but there is something, just a dash, maybe a little tiny dash of something almost slightly animalic in here. I'm not sure if anyone else picks up on this. And like Persolaise was pointing out in his review of the fragrance, there's nothing smoky about the sandalwood in here. Sometimes woody notes in fragrances can give off like a smoky sort of aspect. This is all about this really, really creamy sandalwood that has some level of spice in here as well. And even though I'm not sure that florals are listed in the note pyramid, I think the note pyramid was huge for the 1926 version, and I'm not sure about the EDT, but when I looked up the notes for the EDP, they seemed kind of simple. There's something powdery about the fragrance, to my nose for sure, and it's a little musky. It's not as aldehydic as some of the other Chanel fragrances that are super aldehydic. There's a little bit of it. It's definitely a Chanel. It has that aldehydic Chanel DNA. It's really very beautiful. I'm loving this. There's a beautiful creaminess to it, and that could be not only coming from the sandalwood, it could be, I know that there's ylang in here, but I don't think I saw any floral notes listed. When I get my nose on the fragrance, I sort of pick up different aspects at different times. So sometimes I feel like when I put my nose to it, I'm picking up on the Samsara DNA in the distance. And then there are other times where I feel like I'm picking up something a little floral. And then there are other times that I almost detect something slightly animalic, but nothing that really is a big part of the fragrance. Some sort of aspect to it that's the way it's coming off to my nose. And I feel like the citrus opening, like citruses usually do, kind of like dissipates. And it's the sandalwood that really comes in and obviously takes over. It is a sandalwood fragrance. It's just beautiful. I'm really liking this. I can't wait to wear this more and maybe talk about it along with all the other Chanel fragrances that I have. So this was definitely a successful blind buy, although I did do a ton of research before I purchased this. It's definitely what everyone describes this to be, and that's a really sophisticated fragrance that really is easy to wear. This would be a great fragrance to wear to work as a signature scent. It's definitely as good as everyone says it is, at least from my first impressions here. I really like it. And something like this, comparing it to Matière Première Santal Austral, which I owned and I wore before I decluttered it from my collection. This one has other notes that are so beautifully combined with the sandalwood. I mean, I guess that's why Chanel has so many great fragrances. It's the way they're composed. Persolaise in that video was also describing how Chanel has sort of traditional way of creating fragrances where it's difficult to pick out the notes and they're more abstract creations, and I can totally appreciate that description. I guess that's why I love watching his channel, but that really is the perfect way to describe these beautiful Chanel fragrances that I love, like Cuir de Russie and Coromandel and Le Lion, which, by the way, my bottles of Coromandel and Le Lion now have these 200 ml backup bottles. I never thought I would do backup bottles, but yes, I did. I have 200 ml size bottles of Le Lion and Coromandel, and Bois de Zile, I found the opportunity. It was a 200 ml size bottle, and I'm really glad that I have this in my collection. I think this was a successful blind buy. I'm loving the parts of this that smell like Samsara. I just love it. This is going to make me pull out my vintage bottle of Samsara and spray it. It's magnificent. Samsara is a big fragrance though. This one is like some of the other fragrances. This one has a quiet strength to it. It's what I like to call a quiet strength. It's deceiving. I love these fragrances that seem so simple and subdued. And then you get your nose on them and there's a surprising complexity and there's so much to enjoy. And I think I'm going to enjoy this one. So I'm glad to finally have a sandalwood that I think I'm going to like in my collection. And I'll create a video with this one and the other ones that I have from this house and some samples that I do plan to get my hands on and my nose on. So you guys who have tried this fragrance and are familiar with it, let me know what you think. And as usual, thank you so much for watching, for your support and your comments. Until next time, bye guys.